In addition to supporting ideas, we need to know where to find the material, to gather the material for our speeches and for our presentations. I always love to talk about going to the library or using a librarian as a resource because a trained librarian is a powerful search engine with a heart. It's so much more useful to speak to a person than just to type into Google. What we want to cover today is using your own ideas as part of your supporting material, the library, academic databases, search engines, and even interviews that can be used to support as material in your speech. During your speech, you can't help but use your knowledge. Matter of fact, it is your knowledge that drives your speech, that makes you inquisitive about a topic, that makes you excited to share it, which is all wonderful and great when you're doing a presentation for your college or at a university. However, sadly, that can't be one of your cited sources because it is originating from you. It does have some bias and it hasn't been peer reviewed at all. Now, if you have been peer reviewed and published, you would actually move that into an outside source, not as your own knowledge. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, you can relate stories, of course, from your experiences as support in your presentation, just not as a reference for credit. On campus or in the community, one of the best places to conduct your research is at the library. With the library, you have expansive databases. You have hard copies of books, of periodicals, as well as internet access there. But the best thing you have there is a librarian. Librarians are experienced and knowledgeable on conducting research, on finding hard to find data, and on building how you can support an idea. Additionally, they can help you with those horrible citation problems that you encounter with APA, MLA, or Chicago style citations. They are a wonderful resource and they're always willing to help you. Additionally, as I mentioned, they have a wide catalog. It's not just one internet search. They actually have everything right there, from hard copies, periodicals, to even in some cases most recent newspapers, updated current information, and they can tell you if, of course, if they are properly cited and the strength of the argument that they give, including reference works such as encyclopedias, not like Wikipedia, no, encyclopedias, which are peer-reviewed, editors go over them, they are checked, and so they make for a good resource and a good starting point for many of your speeches. Yearbooks. Yearbooks are not, of course, what you hand out in high school and have everyone sign for you. No, these yearbooks actually cover events for an entire year. Everything from political movements to sports scores can be found in these. They are a good reference point and are a good starting point. Quotation books. What is wonderful about quotation books is they actually track down the originating source for the quotation. Too often when you Google or you search a quotation, you get mixed results for who said it and when they said it and if they're originating or not. Because you want to have Mark Twain as your source, not Justin Bieber. So quotation books are good at that. And if you want to know more about an individual, they have biographical aids. They can help you understand the story and the journeys of people that you might need to include in one of your speeches. Academic databases. Now, the college and universities all have an academic database. Their virtual library where you can log in and you can find newspapers from all over the world. You can find periodicals from all over the world, oftentimes dating back decades. it is a great start for gathering some of that information. But to go beyond that, you want to really start looking at, what can I truly use as a good source in my speech? Scholarly journals, wonderful source. Because with a scholarly journal, it's not just an editor that looks at it. It's not just being published in the local newspaper. Instead, the articles are submitted to a journal such as the American Medical Association or any number of other journals. And an editor looks at it in addition to peers look at it that are knowledgeable and experts in that area. So you'll have perhaps a communication paper that will be reviewed by 5 different individuals who have their degrees in communication, that have their doctorate in that. Same with psychology, same with medicine, same with sociology. This helps ensure the data you have is good and has been through the scientific process, and you know they're a good source because they're peer reviewed and they've been validated. Because unfortunately, some of those periodicals, the information isn't validated, isn't peer reviewed. So you want to go to those scholarly journals. What's nice about the academic databases is that search engine will have check boxes. You can set a time frame. You can set additional information such as peer reviewed, scholarly. You can even narrow where it's coming from, if it's coming from sociology or psychology. So academic databases is a good way to conduct your online search for information to support in your speech. Search engines, they're good and bad. They're a good starting point sometimes because you're able to type in something and get millions of results. Unfortunately, they also might have a tendency to be a little bit biased based on your history of searching the internet. Because search engines are tied to algorithms that examine you in order to determine marketing preferences. So they can actually end up being more of an echo chamber than you like when you're really looking to research an item. Be careful. They can be a good source for starting, but they might be a bit biased. They might also have something that's being promoted by marketing that moves a certain result up higher. And they also can include way too much information that isn't valid, scholarly, or peer-reviewed. If you want to believe anything, you can find a group through a search engine. You want to believe the world is a donut? A search engine will give you a site for that. But it's not going to be a credible site. It's not going to be peer-reviewed. It's not going to have the scientific method applied. So be careful with search engines. One way to tell if your information's good is, of course, the CRAP test. I hope some of you have heard of this. It is a really good way to evaluate a piece of information. First, let's start with currency. Currency is how recent the information is. If it is still good. If you're researching something such as the human genome, you don't want something from 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. Because that area of science is moving so fast, you need something current. You need something within the last 12 months because information's changed that quickly. On the other hand, if you're researching a city or you're researching a person, you might be okay with something from a decade ago. The main thing is to look at your rubric and your guidance from your professor to find out if they have a time frame for the currency of the information you're using. Relevance. Does the information truly address your needs? Is it truly an article about what you're presenting on? Or do you really have to kind of stretch it to connect it? You know, it's not really, but I can kind of draw a line, but it's not truly relevant. It has a lot of good information on something else, but it doesn't connect with what your thesis is. Don't use things that don't connect to your thesis. Get rid of those. Look for things that connect to what the idea is you're supporting. Authority. What is the source of the information? Is the information coming from a scholarly journal, or is it coming from a tabloid magazine? You don't want that tabloid magazine, because the authority there is not going to be very good. Instead, you want to use the scientific method. You want the scholarly, you want the peer-reviewed. So you want to make sure your authority is good. And you also want to make sure they're providing truthful, accurate information. Once again, that tabloid isn't going to give you truthful, honest information. They're there to sell the magazine. On the other hand, the other side, the scholarly journals, will have accuracy and details that you need. One thing you need to always be careful of is, why is this being published? Is it being published to persuade someone? Is it being published to sell something? What exactly is the purpose of it? If the purpose is to persuade or to sell, it's going to be biased. It's going to have a slant to it that could make it not relevant in your presentation, and it could decrease your credibility. So remember the CRAP test. It is a good approach to evaluate your resources. Interviews. Professors love these. We love them. I'll tell you why. Because it's going to someone of knowledge. It's going to someone that will expand your understanding. Of course, you pretty much have to do a CRAP test for who you're interviewing. You have to decide, okay, I want to go talk to the psychiatrist who is going to help me understand mental health issues. So you want to determine, are they licensed? Do they have their degree? How long have they been practicing? You want to evaluate them just like you would any other source. You also have to understand they have a bias, because what they do is related to that field, and they want that field to succeed. One way to help your audience is to acknowledge those biases in your speech. Understand that way your audience can evaluate the information and say, okay, you've acknowledged this bias, so I still want to hear what they have to say. When you are using testimony from interviews, make sure you quote properly. It is too easy to get caught up in just putting out information and paraphrasing to fit into what you're saying. But if you're going to quote someone, please, 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 if you're paraphrasing, please, 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 make sure you go back to the source and make sure you are saying what they want said and that you're doing it correctly. And they can be cited in your speech as a source. What we wanted to cover here is the types of information, where you gather it, where you put it together, how you present it. We want to talk about your knowledge in your presentation, using the library, academic databases, search engines, and interviews. As always, if you need to ask a question, I'm here for you. Email me those, let me know what they are. When you are presenting, your credibility, your ethos is based on the sources you're using. Make sure those are good so that you can deliver the best speech possible. You can be informative or persuasive. This is a key factor in it.